All right, well, welcome everybody. We are glad to see you on leap year or leap day. Happy February 29th. It only happens once every 4 years, so we're excited to be here with you today on our OurClub.tech happy hour. And as usual, we are excited to be here with our good doctor, Dr. Douglas Hines, and myself, Brian Wilson, as your moderator. And over the next half hour, we're going to be talking about this week about the epidemic of loneliness and how belonging can help prevent it. And so, we like to keep these webinars light and fun. And even though this topic is a little bit more, little bit heavier, we hope that you enjoy this as well. But most importantly, we want to help you to understand how belonging can lead to the possibilities of a better you, whether you're a coach, a coachee, a manager, an employee, or just someone here looking for self-improvement and belonging. That's what we're about. So let's jump in. Doug, we've talked about your book and we've referenced your book, Life's 7 Perfect Coaches. And in your book, you do write about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Specifically, the second level of needs are social needs for intimacy and friendship. And before one can move on to self-actualization, which is what we're really helping people with here, that second level of needs must be met. So let's start with this question. You are the scientist in the group of two here. What scientific evidence is there for the so-called epidemic of loneliness?
Okay, so let's start with what science knows about human beings as a species. We're going to start there, and we are fundamentally a social species. And when we were getting ready for this meeting today, Brian, you and I talked about the fact that the most dramatic thing that illustrates this point is a human infant and how it immediately attempts to bond with its mother. And the baby comes equipped with rudimentary social skills, basically, including knowing how to smile that helps make that bonding possible. And into adulthood, we know that human beings, seek other people out. Now, when we start talking about the epidemic of loneliness as a public health issue, what we're really talking about is the fact that if people don't have that opportunity to connect, which in a minute or two we're going to call that belonging, when it comes to adults, it has measurable effects on their health. So whenever I discuss this idea of belonging, I always start with the fact we want to belong. We are motivated to belong. And belonging is one of the things that OurClub.tech is going to help people find, but it's not anything special. It's what we come equipped with. Now, when the subject of the epidemic, so that's the science of the human race. The epidemic concept comes to the fore in the report that the Surgeon General did last year, and they enumerate the social consequences of the fact. Looking at this, basically, it's a lack of connectivity in our society today, and COVID made it worse. But when COVID's gone, and it's still a problem. So that's our jumping off point, is that there is this epidemic. Now, the science on what this causes, there's a very thorough review at the National Library of Medicine. You can find this, the audience can go and find this. all of the studies that have been done to document what happens when a person feels isolated. They're basically afraid, and that's what the science shows. And basically, they've identified interventions. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing to know is that this is really a problem. And Brian, I know you've dug up some research of your own. Talk about teenagers don't hang out.
Well, it's fascinating. When we were talking about belonging, the phone listens to you, the Apple Watch listens to you, the phone listens to you, and so when we started talking about belonging, I started getting these hits in my algorithm feed about belonging. And the interesting thing about the connection, the physical connection, being together between teenagers, and how that has decreased significantly over time. And it used to be that teens would at least get together at least 2 times a week outside of school for history until recently. And now that engagement with your peers outside of the school setting has really dropped off. And some of the findings were attributing that to simply being on devices, gaming, the pandemic, et cetera. So there's a lot of reasons for this epidemic of loneliness. But in our conversation, you also mentioned the opposite of loneliness is belonging. But how does belonging help to prevent this epidemic of loneliness?
So it would do so one person at a time. There's no, having looked at the public health literature on this for a while now, because I'm interested in this anyway. All of the so-called interventions, things that you can do, have mostly to do with the individual. And I have the list from this very comprehensive summary of the literature, and enhancing social skills is something that needs to be done. And so all these games work against that, because you have to exert some energy to connect and with another human being. Connecting with a machine is very easy. You turn it on and get involved in the game. So one thing we can do, and we intend to do this in OurClub.tech, is give people opportunities to interact with other people that they wouldn't have otherwise. And this is, now we're talking about adults. We're talking about professionals who are sort of been cut adrift because of the new workforce, the gig economy, which works against connectivity. I liked the thing that you cited when we were talking earlier today, the picture of New York in 1928 or something. In the because one of the things, if recap that so I can tell our viewers what that means to the psychologists who study loneliness.
So I found it very interesting. There were 2 pictures of the streets of New York. Both pictures were bustling with people. One was from the 20s and one was from today. And the difference from the 20s to today that just jumped out to me immediately was, in the 20s photo, you could see everybody's face. Everyone had their head up, their chins up, they're looking around, they're paying attention, they're seeing each other. It's the nod to the next person on the street. It's the tip of the hat from the gentleman. That kind of engagement, awareness of people around you was in that photo. That's what jumped out to me. And in today's photo, you almost never saw anybody's face. Of course, there were, lots of heads that were down. Some of them were partially masked. But it was just a difference between the 2 photos. Both a ton of people on the streets walking by each other, but you could see how in the city of New York, maybe people used to feel connected as New Yorkers, whereas today maybe there's not that same connection, which helps to create this epidemic of loneliness.
That's right. And so one of the clinical findings in this research area is that loneliness is a form of fear, actually, of other human beings, because you feel like you are disconnected from them. I used to teach small group analysis at the University of Maryland. I was a professor, and we would have every year, every semester, 25 new students. And I wanted to get a real quick sense of what these folks were like, because we were going to do a lot of small experiments and small group behavior, right? And one of the first things I looked for when they walked into the classroom the very first time was, were they looking around with their head held up as if to invite engagement, or were they walking in kind of with their head down and a little bit hunched in the shoulder because they were fearful? And it was sad to me back then, and that I didn't know nearly as much as I know now about this phenomenon. They just did not feel comfortable meeting a new group of human beings, and so that is a bad feeling. And I won't go through the list of heart disease and diabetes. It's amazing the things that seem to be secondary consequences of loneliness, especially in adults. So when we established the idea of the OurClub.tech, we wanted to overcome this. We wanted to somehow have, and we're trying to innovate, create a new institution that enables people to feel like they belong, feel like they can connect, feel like they can spontaneously talk to other human beings. We know when we've talked about this in other programs here. LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a great resource, but if you are looking for friends on LinkedIn, good luck. It's not really designed for that, and we think we can change that, believe it or not. And the mechanics of this, we make it to in this program. We might get to that later, where if you're a member of OurClub.tech, you in effect are inviting others to connect with you, not just literally in the LinkedIn sense of connecting, but that would be part of it, but just to connect. And the app we'll talk about, Perfect Coaches, has baked into it ways. This was designed for college students, where if you're on campus, you can find, your phone will find for you other people who are Perfect Coaches users, and you can meet them on campus. Now, how we will use that in the current incarnation, which is an international organization, we're not sure, but we want to be able to give people a chance to connect.
You know,
and that's
and I will bring up something that we discussed earlier. You speak about LinkedIn and making connections. You know, before LinkedIn, kind of the giant connector was Facebook, and that
right.
was kind of personal friends, and it became this thing to request, you know, a friend. Do you
Right.
want to be my friend? Do you want to be my friend?
Right.
And in LinkedIn, it's, you know, do you want to make a connection? But connection, being connected or being a member of something, doesn't necessarily mean that you have a relationship or a sense of
That is
belonging.
exactly right.
There is a gap there. So can you just tell us how does OurClub.tech plan to address this?
So there's a couple of things that are baked into our structure. Number one, when you join the club, you are a member of a club, and the other members are saying, in effect, we share this bond. Now, we share a methodology, an approach to coaching, and all like that. But the first thing is a sense of a shared bond. Now, in the Perfect Coaches psychological model, we call this an inner experience. It's something that happens inside of you. You feel like, okay, I can connect with this person, and we can make that actually happen with the app. Now, the interesting thing about Facebook, when we looked into this early, very early, we're going to use Facebook, of course, but Facebook has become more of a showcase than a connection mechanism, basically. And people, get tired of seeing Aunt Sadie's pictures of the snow in Michigan. I've seen all the pictures I need, and there's no real connection. They're not talking to each other. And again, as we spoke this morning, the brain research shows that when you hear a human voice versus you're hearing a human voice, it causes more activity in your brain. When you see a human face, it's an even greater effect, depending on a lot of circumstances that people who study the brain can tell you about. And so the first thing we're going to do is provide social support in the idea we're going to support you if you're trying to connect with other people. We're going to make that a little bit easier to do if you're virtually. Okay, so we're making a distinction in Perfect Coaches between connecting virtually. That's the club is going to be an international organization, so we believe where you're connecting virtually. Now you're also going to be able to connect physically, because the concept is, and we discussed this in an earlier program, local meetings of OurClub.tech will not be held in conference rooms. They will not be held in auditoriums where there's little tables around. We're going to hold them in taverns. We had a lighthearted conversation, but nevertheless, this is true. Taverns have been one of the places in the history of Western civilization where people can connect. They can get together. They can see each other. And I think all of your viewers will appreciate this fact. If you can see the reactions on the other person's face, that is a completely different situation than seeing them in a still picture on Facebook or in a movie they made for others. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have intimate groups around the world that are talking about the same issues, which are basically coaching the verb, coach the verb, not the noun, which is teaching others. So we're going to do it that way. So there's an opportunity for social interaction. There's an opportunity to enhance your skills. This is one of the things that's cited in the literature is what needs to happen. So the Perfect Coaches app in and of itself teaches social skills. And if you want to practice them, you got to go and talk to other people. So there's that part of it. And then we're going to talk about founding members. What we want to see if we can figure this out is how you believe you are part of a group that has an identity that you have earned. And so if you go to OurClub.tech, viewers, they'll see you explain this idea of the club tie. That's part of our logo. And the club tie is not because you wear a tie or it's not making it a men's club. It's the idea of belonging to a group that has an identity. And that's really what we're trying to do with OurClub.tech is create an identity, a sense of belonging, and a sense that you are invited to interact with others.
And that's great because it is filling a void that exists today,
right,
that is not being addressed anywhere else.
That's correct. If I can just elaborate on that point, Brian. So I have been talking to other people in the coaching business. We go through LinkedIn to try to establish a connection, and if the person wants to, we can have a 15-minute phone call, and I've done a couple dozen of those. And these are people who are in the coaching business, and they all basically say the same thing. They feel obliged to give other people the chance to at least talk to them, as a coach. They're the gig economy is I'm quoting somebody else here, one of these phone calls. The gig economy is a lonely place. And we're trying to address that we're not unique in this. In fact, what we're trying to do is harness all of the folks who are trying to address this problem and have them pulling in tandem to really make a difference.
And that's where the innovation, the power of innovation, collaborative innovation, comes into focus.
Right. That's exactly true.
And of course, as you will see when you visit our website, belonging is one of the goals of OurClub.tech.
Right.
I mean, lead, coach, innovate, belong.
Right.
So this is a leap year. This is the leap day. I hope everybody is enjoying this extra day of the year. So
right.
What are we going to do to celebrate, Doug?
Well, so we're actually opening the doors, or actually opening the registration portal, to be a little bit more literal, for people to join. And part of the, I guess, the incentive to join the club, become a member of the club, or even to get the Perfect Coaches app is you can get a 20% discount. And you do that by registering with the registration code, promotion code, Founder 2024. It's either Founder or Founders. It's one of, I think it's Founders 2024. No, Founders 24 is what it is, with capital F. And when you do that, then you get a discount, and you become a member, and you're one of the founding members, which will give you other opportunities to be innovative inside of the boundaries. Let me change the imagery here. Get harnessed on this team that is pulling in tandem to give modern day professionals a different way to feel that they belong to a bigger group than just themselves.
So this is a great day, because now we're going to open this up to fellow members. But Doug, before we go, we've talked about the epidemic of loneliness. We've talked about how OurClub.tech is going to address this, and opening an invitation for others to join us. What is one thing today, based on your scientific background, your knowledge, what is one thing today, one action today that people could take to help address that feeling or that sense of loneliness that they may be having right now?
Okay, so we won't count joining OurClub.tech. So
don't count the joining the club.
So what is suggested in some of these studies is just strike up a conversation with another person. It's not that hard, actually. And I've experimented to some degree. I don't know what you think about the statement I'm about to make. I'm a shy person. I won't go out of my way to strike up a conversation or hang out with somebody. But I've tried this, and it works. You strike up a conversation. You can say, I'm down in Florida actually right now, and we've had terrible weather, and now suddenly the weather is better. And I will say to almost every person I see, finally, great weather, and they say yes, and that's it. So I ran into a guy who was in the Marine Corps. He had a hat, and I said, "Semper Fi." It's called an action opportunity, actually, in small group analysis, and he responded back. So just if you want to do one thing today that's different, just try striking up a conversation with a stranger, or better yet, strike up a conversation with an intimate. You're a friend, your spouse, your significant other, a coworker. Try it. We've observed, as a consultant, I observed workplaces, and it's surprising how people will be heads down in their work and won't even speak to each other. So that would be my thing. Talk to somebody, and you'll feel better.
Talk to somebody.
Better.
You will feel better. And I would just follow that up by saying, if you don't know what to say, ask questions.
That's exactly right.
Ask questions.
That's true.
The more that you can ask others to talk about themselves to you, the
Right.
better you make them feel.
That's correct.
And then that can also help you with a sense of belonging, because if they're going to mirror you at some point in the conversation, they will ask you similar questions.
Right.
So
Right.
start off with the questions. How are you doing? How are things going? Are you enjoying this weather that we've got recently?
Right. Or
Asking
you're not
questions,
enjoying
asking questions is a great way to break the ice.
it. Yes, it is. It
It's
is.
a
It
great way
is.
to break the ice.
Yes. And again, small group analysis, I taught it for years. Asking the people in a group, the people who ask questions energize the group. And you're standing in front of a class and they ask a stupid question, pardon me saying that, uh, and it creates some energy when somebody initiates interaction, and then if somebody answers, there's a snowball effect where people become energized by the conversation, and the going all the way back to talking about humans as a species, the early tribal customs, many of them evolved around the idea of here is where we're going to get together. This imagery of being gathered around a campfire. We're going to do that. We're going to get everybody together and have them interact with each other. And some early anthropologists said that's a better way than what the Europeans are doing, because everything that European industrialization was doing is pulling people apart. And the anthropologists who were of the day said that's going to hurt. And they were right. And that's why we have an epidemic of loneliness.
Well, that's that this is all very good to talk about, first of all, because a lot of people don't want to talk about that feeling of loneliness. They just
Right.
they get stuck. So it kind of becomes a cycle of, I'm just going to contract more and more into myself.
Right.
And so the point of what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people become better versions, or the best versions of
Of
themselves.
themselves. Right.
And it starts out with a baby step. So find someone, have a conversation, start a conversation, and get going. That's a great way to begin to break this cycle, or this feeling of loneliness. And
Right.
Doug, we're coming up here on the end of our half hour. So I just want to, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us here. And this, as Doug said earlier, this is the official launch of OurClub.tech, and you can now sign up and join. And as a reminder, at OurClub.tech, there are two distinct membership levels. The first level is for the Adventure Clubhouse, and the second is the senior level called Leadership Clubhouse, and that is by application and approval. And you can certainly
Right.
find out all you need to know about both of those on our website at OurClub.tech. And I do want to remind you that, as Doug said, register now at Our Club with the code FOUNDER24, and you get a 20% discount. 20% discount.
Forever.
Forever.
For the first group that joins, as we've discussed, we hope they will become the nucleus of what is almost like a movement inside of the workforce to have this sense of belonging and shared interest in coaching and so forth and so on. So yes, we're going to treasure our first members and coddle them a little bit is the game plan.
That's right. So thank you all for joining. Don't forget to follow us and like us on your favorite social media platforms as well. Our YouTube channel is now up, and this webinar will be posted shortly. So on behalf of Dr. Doug and myself, we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing each and every one of you with us at OurClub.tech.
Thank you, Brian. And that does it for the meeting.
That does it for today. Thank you, guys.
Okay.